Welcome to Educate, Agitate, Organise Saturday. This project is a joint endeavour between Don't Leave Organise and Socialist Telly. And this week I am joined by my co-host Jane Aitchison. Jane, how are you doing?
It's been a very, very good week, Matt. And we've got some really powerful stuff to look at today.
Yeah, it's quite it's a challenging topic this week, isn't it? So should we? And we've got quite a lot of guests on the programme. So should we just go straight to the interview? On May the 25th last year, George Floyd was murdered by police in Minneapolis. This sparked global outrage and street protest. In the UK, in June and July of last year, protests were held across the country against police brutality and racism under the banner of Black Lives Matter. These have been described as the largest British anti-racism rallies in modern times. In this programme, 1 year later, we reflect on what these new and growing decentralised street movements mean for the left and for the struggle for equality. Really delighted this week to be joined by excellent guests who are going to be reflecting on what those last 12 months of activism have meant and how we strive and reach forward for a more racially equal world. I'm joined by Andrea Gilbert from Labour Black Socialists. Andrea, really great to have you here.
Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
And Kathy Augustine from Don't Leave Organise and many other organisations as well, and sometimes co-host of the show. Kathy, really great for you to join us.
Hello.
Weyman Bennett, who is co-convenor of Stand Up to Racism.
Very glad to be here.
And also Dee Free, who is a spoken word artist and activist from Leeds. Really great to have you with us.
Thank you for asking me.
So, my first question, obviously, George Floyd is a victim of police violence and racism and brutality in the States. They have a very different history, but we still have, of course, issues of racialized policing in this country. Weyman, what are the issues? What are the differences between our policing and their policing? And what do we still have to tackle in this country?
I think the UK is not innocent. I think we have to say for 9 minutes and 28 seconds, we saw Chauvin murder someone. If the same thing happened here, there's been over 1,000 deaths that have been recorded. Large numbers of them have been Black. And actually what you've seen is a response of the government by Priti Patel has been to launch a counterattack on a multiracial movement that was led by Black generals and a wish to silence anybody that would put any kind of critical critique about why the police have been institutionally racism or been institutionally racist, an attempt really to, I think they were shocked by the size of a multiracial movement after years and years of, they thought simply that everybody would accept their racist agenda. And that was the assumption by people like, I think, Boris Johnson. After all, he referred to Black people as being pickaninnies, Muslim women are looking like bank robbers. And I think what we really have to understand is that, as Frederick Douglass said, their plan was to use racism to divide each to conquer both. And that history was something that was being exposed. And I think the Black Lives Matter movement showed something which I think lots of people wanted to support and would continue to support if they were given a chance. I think that's what the movement showed. And I think that what we have to understand from this, I think, is that unity sparked, but still exists and can be harnessed for progress.
Thank you. Well, deaths in custody are obviously a subject of great concern for a number of reasons. The people that this applies to are intrinsically vulnerable. They are under the power of the state when they are in custody, with a huge power imbalance. So I look back at some figures, and from 1998 to 2010, a total of 333 people died in or following police custody. No officer has ever been successfully prosecuted. Prosecutions were recommended against 13 officers involved in those deaths, under a relatively strong evidence of misconduct or neglect That's pretty powerful, but not a single one resulted in a guilty verdict. Although numbers fell over the next 10 years to May 2020, 164 people have died in or following police custody in that period. But when you compare these figures to how much of the population those groups represent, it works out that Black people are more than twice as likely to die in police custody.
Andrea, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, as Kathy was saying, the stats are absolutely, ridiculous and disgraceful in the UK as well. Over 1,000 people have been killed by the police. Not one officer's been prosecuted. You've only got to look at the stats for stop and search as well. Ethnic minorities are, more likely to be stopped and searched by the police. And, 85% of black men who are stopped and searched are not prosecuted. So, it just goes to show that this ridiculous policies here, and it's just literally here to discriminate against people. It's not having any impact. It's not stopping the stabbings that are going on in London. It's not having an impact on anything.
It's not necessarily designed to protect us. It's actually, being tailored into a story, stitched into a tapestry to make out that we are something to be locked up, caged, something to be feared, which is totally not the case. And for those reasons, when a Black person or a non-white is maybe pulled over by police or addressed, they are dealt with in a completely different way than their white counterpart.
So what would you say, D3, what would you say the key lessons of the last 12 months of campaigning and protest in this country?
The key lessons to be learned is there is still a lot of unrest. There is still a lot of unhappiness and inequality. Otherwise, we wouldn't still be standing. And there's a lot of people that are complaining about the outward ripple of protests across the world. But the fact is, we still have to do this. We are tired of having to do this, but we haven't got a choice. So that's the key lesson. And the fact that it kind of did send an outward ripple throughout the world goes to show how many people are actually sick of it, Black people and white people alike.
Weyman, what are the key lessons of the last 12 months?
Well, I was speaking to the people in Pollock Shields who'd stopped a van or two asylum seekers in a brilliant activity. And most of those activists said that they come out of Black Lives Matter movement. And that flashed across the world. They haven't. I think one of the lessons is Colston statue's gone. They've attempted to prosecute people for doing something they should have done 100 years ago. So I think one of the things is that things have not fundamentally changed. And to be honest, there's a joined up strategy of giving people austerity, misdirecting people, and then pretending that there's an enemy within. Today, or when this week, we'll see Priti Patel launch an attack on asylum seekers and immigrants and try and blame them for the very problems that we face. I think there's been a sea change in the sense that it's not automatic that people believe the police in their treatment of Black people. Why do people think Line of Duty is so popular? The reason it's so popular is because when I was growing up, there's something called the miners' strike, and when they beat up the miners, nobody believed. Lots of people didn't believe the miners. Today, I think that there's a shift in terms of a sense of solidarity amongst people, not amongst everybody, not amongst the Tories, not amongst large numbers of people that feel that you can blame somebody else, but nevertheless, it's sparked a movement that is there, not necessarily all the time on the street, but there's also been a shift. And I think that's the reason why the government's battling so hard in its culture wars to try and drag people and try and put forward a narrative that divides us.
I mean, that's a really interesting point. I mean, at the beginning there, where you said sort of the nature. So I think we should talk a bit about what's the Black Lives Matter movement look like in this country? Because you've been an activist for a long time. Is there something new and different about this particular campaign, this particular movement? Are we seeing the sort of activists who are involved? Are they different to the activists that we would have seen 20, 30 years ago, do you think?
I think that I'll give an example. I mean, for my sins, I'm a West Ham fan, right? But when there's been difficult days, difficult arguments amongst large numbers of people that go to football. but it's quite moving for when the players take the knee, large numbers of people watching take the knee. Not everybody, but when I was going to, first went to football when I was a child, that never would have happened, yeah? There wouldn't be an automatic sense there's something wrong here and we have to challenge it. And I think that's a positive. The negative is the genuine attempt to use racism and to silence particularly young voices, a lot more young people. They used to say people are apathetic. I think one of the aspects of the movement is that lots of young people have joined the movement with expectation for change. They march on many different issues. They march about the bill. They march about Sarah Everhart, so you're seeing a sense of where people think something's wrong and they're joining together. And I think the Black Lives Matter is a major chunk of that. It was led by Black generals or Black women in particular, but nevertheless, we've seen that movement. It's very hard for the government to silence those people, but they will attempt to do that. I think there will be a genuine attempt to silence those people for speaking out or to pillarize them. And I think that's an important thing. And one quick other thing, I'll speak a bit more and give you enough time, is that I think the TUC action of saying the trade union, the biggest organised workers group, to say that we support Black Lives Matter, that everybody should take the knee at work. I think things like that are unprecedented. And I think that's important. People say it's a symbol of multiracial Britain, but it's also a symbol of solidarity with globally as well against people opposing racism. And that's important. And it's very difficult for our rulers and the people that run our society to accept that.
Kathy?
Yeah, absolutely. Collective movement, I think, is so very important. We've seen so many different groupings coming together in this coalition for Black Lives Matter and for Kill the Bill. One of the things I'm very keen on is that although well-meaning amendments have been tabled to the police bill, we still have to fight it in its absolute entirety. And it's dangerous when it's presented as purely upsetting the right to protest. It's so much more than that. Much more than that. And so for me, Andrea's point about collective working, bringing all the groups together, solidarity, unity, they have to be our watchwords. Now, for those who watch this programme regularly will know that I like to throw in a bit of history. And in 1866, Frederick Douglass and others responded to a speech from the then President of the United States, Andrew Johnson, including these words: "The hostility between the whites and blacks of the South is easily explained. It has its root and sap in the relation of slavery and was incited on both sides by the cunning of the slave masters. Those masters secured their ascendancy over both the poor whites and the poor blacks by putting enmity between them. They divided both to conquer each." So over the past year, we've heard a couple of phrases that have caused a bit of controversy, I guess. One is defund the police, and I think maybe Andrea can tell us about that in a minute. But the other one is white privilege. Now, that's been criticised and seen as divisive by some people. Now, in my view, white privilege simply means not having to deal with racism on top of all the other oppressions that we are enduring in common. So it's an extra thing. But of course, no matter what the colour of our skin, we are all fighting against misogyny, ableism, attempts to remove workers' rights, the running down of public services, particularly our NHS, services that the few who seek to divide us can afford to pay for privately, but we can't. So I think that removing those artificial divisions imposed by a post-colonial elite to keep us all in our place and divided has to be a key part of our fight against anti-racism, and also being actively anti-racist. So, together we are rock, divided we are sand, and we can't allow the establishment to divide and rule.
Yeah, I think Kathy's spot on with what she's saying there. And to me, in terms of defunding the police, I believe that basically means, taking away their funding and putting it towards services like mental health, housing, and things that actually need this funding. Like, look, at the end of the day, people who know me know that I'm based in homelessness. That's where I am. That's where you're always going to find me. And that's my focus. That's what I want to do. That's what I want to achieve, ending homelessness. And look, like, this government has been taking money for the last 10 years. And, we've got a situation where there's a lack of homes being built. We've got so many families in temporary accommodation. We've got people sleeping in their friends' brothers, sisters, cousins' homes because there's nowhere for them to live. And at the end of the day, we're providing funding to the police that are basically going out there and targeting Black and other ethnic minorities. That's basically what they're doing. None of the crime stats are going down, they're going up. Knife crime is out of control. And the only people that seem to be getting blamed for this is Black males. But there's some parts where this is happening and there's not a Black male in sight. So at the end of the day, like, it's a problem that's everywhere. And, we're pretty much funding an organisation to target ethnic minorities, and it's wrong, mate.
I think there's a conscious effort to divide Black and white in this country. I think this is not, when Boris Johnson made those statements, there's an MP called Drax, and he lives in the southwest. If you look at his estate, there's a 1 million brick wall that divides him from the people in the southwest and Dorset in his constituency. It's a huge house, like Downton Abbey. His family had plantations in Barbados. He's still got plantations in Barbados. He's still a filthy, rich, vicious Tory who says that this country is full and benefit people are scroungers. He says these things, right? They're the same people. The same people. His family were part of the family that organised the enclosures inside this country. But they have an ideology that says, blame somebody else. I think racism is a powerful weapon, especially around elections, around those things, where it misdirects people. So it's not even that, if you say, is it horrible? Is it to experience racism is horrible? But who actually benefits from dividing people and saying that people should be divided? It's the same set of people, and partly that's quite difficult because people said experience it. You can experience it directly at the hands of somebody who's white, who's doing it to you. But actually, when you go to dig deeper into why they're doing it or the sense of why they're doing it, obviously you have to reject that. But when you talk about organised institutional racism, the Windrush crisis, all these things are not accidental. They're actually a feature of our society. And actually, we, in some senses, I think that's what they're more worried about. Because if we challenge the general racism, and I think we should do, but we should go after the institutional racism, the stops and searches, the deportations. And where there's unity against it, we should go for that. But, I kind of feel that what's changed is there's an enormous sense that something's wrong. It's not easy to say how you change it. If even today, the government can steal 56 billion people for them in COVID. And, you'll say, and people be more worried about people signing on or something like that as a major problem and believe that's the problem. But in front of our eyes, Priti Patel, a friend accidentally got this contract, or a friend of David Cameron, suddenly he was campaigning on them and he didn't realize, but he doesn't want to disclose how much he got paid. It's a private matter. None of these things are private matter. Most of these people are misdirection. And I think racism has a devastating impact on people's lives. But what I would argue very, very clearly is that people in the same situation where I grew up in a working class estate, to be honest, many people are in the same situation. But there is a distinction between, I say, the Drax. Those people benefit from racism because they want to keep people divided, and it works. You can get one people against. Emperor Nero said, always get one set of the poor to blame the other set of the poor, right? The other one set of Black people have a harder time, but the division is the key. And I think the thing about Black Lives Matter movement is it ripped apart. Lots of people in the same situation had some sense of unity amongst them. And I think that's what scared the government. That's why Priti Patel said it's disgusting. And that's why they produced a Cred report that went in and showed exactly the opposite. And that's what I'm trying. I think the most important thing is the conscious, naked racism of the people at the top is much more exposed. It is a 300-year history, but it's a history that doesn't belong to everybody. Because some people went down the pits, some people were enclosed, some people were enslaved, but some people were organised in that, and they wish to defend their history. And for us in the Black Lives Matter movement, I want to expose people like Drax. It's something which people would agree on, and I think that's what worries them. Do you know what I mean? But this is my own. I think the stand up to racism has been arguing this for a long time. This is not an accident. There are people systematically using racism for their own political gain because they think it binds what they say the British community together. We're all in it together. We're not. So we're their sides on this. And I think the people that chose the Black Lives Matter side shows a question of progress, and it's a dent in the way that the people who run our society feel.
Is it important that we separate then the sort of the culture war stuff, which is real kind of cynical attempt to speak to one part of the electorate, and the structural stuff? Are they quite different things? Is that what you're arguing?
I think they're joined up, actually. I think somebody can turn around and say, why is Priti Patel on a dawn raid? Why are they showing a picture of them dragging somebody away in handcuffs? Because this might be controversial. Why is David Cameron in handcuffs and she's standing there with her secretary, whatever it is, yeah? Because it's a conscious effort to misdirect people. We've just lost 120,000 people. Dominic Cummings is no friend of mine. But if the government pursued a herd immunity strategy, which in disproportionately Black people died, we're talking about a social murder that was done. Yet what they're saying is that they misdirect people. Bolton or various other places got higher levels of COVID because immigrant communities are not following the direction, or they're not taking the vaccine. In other words, there's a conscious effort to do that. I think what's important is, particularly, when I listen to my son, there's a sense of confidence amongst the Black Lives Matter movement that previous generations, I don't think, they're demanding change, and they're demanding change with their other people. That's what's changed. I don't think things have fundamentally changed. Stop and search has gone up. The attacks on different communities has increased, in my opinion. What I think has changed is a sense of solidarity that people have amongst each other. Now, that's not good enough, but I think we've got a real battle on our hands to make sure that we prove the UK is not innocent.
So, look, I mean, what does the next 12 months need to look like for Black Lives Matter, for fighting in this country for racial equality? Andrea?
It looks like the continuing to protest, you know what I mean? Like we continue going on the streets, we can continue organising, do you know what I mean? Mobilising isn't enough. We need to continue organising, getting people that are not political involved in these things as well. Do you know what I mean? We need to create these mass movements to increase the pressure on this government. You know, at the end of the day, sadly, the Labour leadership isn't fighting our corner on certain issues, and we need to continue fighting this for ourselves. We can only fight for ourselves now. So, you know, we've got to continue pushing and fighting and demanding that these changes come through. And obviously, we've got to ensure that police bill does not get through at all.
Kathy?
Yeah, perfect. So, you said we sometimes look to the political leadership for answers and to help us scope out what's happening in the next year. Well, that ain't going to help us one bit. We've just had the long-awaited review into Islamophobia within the Conservative Party. Tory MPs are actually saying that this is a complete whitewash. It's absolutely ridiculous. Boris Johnson said in response, he won't use some of the offending language now that he's Prime Minister. I can't speak about that without swearing, so I'll carry on. The report concludes that from the very top, the Prime Minister, down to, local Tory party members, there is inherent, embedded racism, particularly Islamophobia. In parallel with this, the government's putting forward the police bill that we've talked about. Not only restricts our right to protest, but will heap further oppression on already marginalised communities. So I agree with all the other speakers who have said that we have to continue in our fight to kill the bill, in its entirety. And then, while the Tories continue to act like Tories, which is sickening but expected, the Labour leadership colludes, with abstentionism against bills that are going to impact on our communities, spy cops. Look what has happened within trade unions being infiltrated in that way. And then, of course, with attempts to sweep under the carpet the alleged appalling racism exposed by the Labour leaks document. So will we ever see the Ford report published in full? So the two main parties are equally shockingly poor on this, and we have to take it into our own hands, as Andrea and others have said, build a movement, grassroots up, stay on the streets, and don't be silenced.
And Day Free, what do you think the next 12 months looks like for the movement?
Well, I will say as well, I have to praise what the movement has done so far, and solidarity, and so the next 12 months is obviously to keep up the pressure, keep up the continuum of it, think beyond just creating a nuisance in protests and things like that, and create ways for the Black community, the migrant community to be able to build for themselves and things like that, and create a better foundation for us in this country where we work and pay taxes. Because the people are responding. We need the institutions and the governments to respond back to us, because we are the people of this country, and that's what we have to remember. We are the people.
Weyman, what do you think the next 12 months looks like for Black Lives Matter?
To be honest, I think it's an intensification of an attack on all of us. I don't believe Boris Johnson when he says he's going to level up. They've never given us any money, and they're not going to give us any money now. I think there'll be a levelling up of when people find out that all the plans about global Britain doesn't work, then I'm sorry, there's going to be scapegoating, because that is the method that they're going to have. So what I see is a period of intense conflict following the corona crisis. And I think that what I see is we've seen demonstrations over the weekend. We've seen demonstrations coming up in the next couple of months. And I believe that people will more and more have to take to the streets, and that Black Lives Matter will be part of that, because a new generation has been won to the idea that you protest. But what I believe is that we face an intensification of racism. Why? Because I think the Conservative Party is much closer to Trump than it is to what I would call the old patrician class. There's a man called Enoch Powell, which many people watching this might not remember. But when he made his statement of rivers of blood, he was expelled from the Labour Tory party. Today, you've got many people with those ideas at the centre, people like Michael Gove, at the centre of British politics. And I think they haven't got a real practical answer to the problems that people face. So I think that they're hostile to the Black community. I think they're Islamophobic. I think that they use culture wars to misdirect people and to divide people. You have the feature of racist, anti-racist people blaming others, claiming that they're anti-racist and they're not, from the government. I think we've got all these attacks to come. But what I'm also looking forward to is the level of solidarity like that we're seeing on Wednesday, where trade unions and other people start the fight against it, say that we will resist. I think that's what came out of the Black Lives Matter movement. There's nothing they could do. That statue was toppled, and that is actually a historical act that was done by people from below. So I believe that there's a grassroots sense of people feeling wronged, and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think for us, is not, the leader of the Labour Party said it was a moment, right? But, actually, I think it's actually a movement, because I think that the people that have lost their families, I'm speaking to some of them, they won't stay quiet. And I think more people will speak up. I think that's one of its legacies, that people feel, even if they have a small voice, that they can speak up with other people and get a larger voice. I don't think that'll lead to automatic change, But it is the beginning of a sense where I think that people feel so angry that they'll keep speaking up. So I think we should, it's part of the change that's taking place. So that's what we're looking forward to in the future. So I'll stop there. So,
Andrea, I wonder, I'll ask you first. What do you think? Do you think this is a watershed moment? Do you think is this a pivotal moment where we might see some real change, or is there a risk that things go back to normal, people forget, they lock down restricted, they go back to their lives, and this is kind of forgotten and it fades away? What do you think?
For me, I think it's a pivotal moment in the fact that more numbers are coming out onto the streets. So it's not just the organised left that are coming out. You're seeing people that don't organise and are not politically inclined and stuff that are out on the streets now wanting to get involved in these things. So I think it's pivotal in that sense. In terms of the government and that, man, we're not going to see any changes from them. But so that's why I say that what I'm going to be doing anyway, and what I'm hoping everyone else will be doing, is continuing to go out to the streets, continuing to organise, continuing to work with groups like Black Lives Matter and EXAR, and continuing to support the communities like the Gypsy Roma travellers, who are just completely excluded from everything. Do you know what I mean? It's just absolutely ridiculous how these people are treated. So I just feel like, we've got to keep the pressure on the government and, just show that we're not going to continue to be treated like this as a society.
I think it's really important as well to remember that all these street movements, all this activism, when it does win, it gets co-opted by the establishment, and they pretend that it was always the accepted thing. We pretend that Rosa Parks was a nice little old lady on a bus who never said boo to a goose and things like that. Kathy, do you think this is a moment of real change?
Yeah, I really do. And I think, ironically, it's almost part of the fact that socialists within the Labour Party now do not have a leader. So we know we've got to do it for ourselves. It's much more complicated than that, but it's almost like, and again, it's almost like, well, now we just have to get on with it. We're not going to get led. We're not going to get a parliamentary solution, but we just have to do it. And the Kill the Bill, Black Lives Matter, and also the incredible mobilizations in support of the Palestinian people. This is week after week after week. I remember working to help mobilise for the huge march for the NHS in 2017. And it took so much work, and we got 250,000 people out, 250,000, and we were delighted. I mean, I know there was work behind it, but 2 weeks in a row, 200,000 people on the streets of London and up statues and cranes, absolutely in solidarity with the people of Palestine and opposing this oppression that just cannot go on. And the hostile environment for us in the UK, it's all of us. You think about Tony Benn saying, look at how a country treats its refugees. That's how they would treat us if they could get away with it. Well, they nearly did. Johnson and Cummings and their herd immunity, which was basically eugenics and social murder. If they could get away with it, they would do that to us. And I think people are starting to realise that. And this unity, the solidarity, we are the many, is really starting to sink in, I think, in people's consciousness.
So people watching this, hopefully inspired by what you just said, I certainly was. How can they help? What can they do?
I think they can do three things. I think that they can, firstly, I think they should join anything that involves resistance. Anything that involves resistance, they should join and collectively organise. Secondly, they should demand an change in the way that our young people are educated. They should demand that education belongs to them, and that what we demand. If people say people want to cancel history, no, what they want to do is a total view of history. I think that Black people have been written out of history, women have been written out of history, the LGBT plus community being written out of history. It's time that they were they were put back in. But I think that I was encouraged by the Pimlico students who took action. I've heard that the headmaster has somehow mysteriously disappeared after the Black Lives Matter demonstrations inside their schools. And I think we should follow the children. If the younger people, the pupils of that, I think that what we have to do is make sure that a new generation comes forward. In particular, I would say a multiracial Black working class movement that has a sense of itself, its own history, and begins to fight back against a government, I believe, that is racist, sexist, homophobic, and divisive. And the Black Lives Matter movement is part of that chain reaction of those people saying that we want a voice for change. So join the movement, take the knee where you can, and be active. That's what I would say. Don't think that it's a moment. You're part of a movement that shows itself, doesn't always show itself, but you're part of that. And that's what we should say to people. Keep going on that. That's the only way we're going to get change.
Fantastic. Thank you. And D3, how can people support Black Lives Matter? How can people help?
Everything that Weyman just said, get involved in something, whatever way that you choose to do it. You might be young, fit, virile, and be able to go do up the marches and, be a body in that crowd, do that. Maybe you're older, write letters, keep on your MP, be on somebody's back, just keep it going. Do you know what I mean? And the youngsters of today, I'm absolutely loving how they're, jumping into this. They've got so many things to speak up about, from, the bill, the kill the bill, to climate change. And they're thinking about the country that they are going to have to, be the ambassadors of one day, and how they would want that. So there's so many things. I feel like it's a melting pot of heightened situation right now. And, you're either in or you're out. So that's basically what it is. You're either in or you're out. And if you're out, then regardless of what happens to this country, basically, you might as well just, wander off into a corner and not say anything, because if you're not in, you really haven't got a say about how it turns out. So this is the only way that you've got to say. You have to be in it and get involved, whichever way. There's loads of different ways. So it doesn't matter of the amount of time you've got, the amount of money you've got. Do you know what I mean? You can find a way. Go online. Go to Black Lives Matter. Go to Stand Up to Racism. Go to Kill the Bill. Go to anything.
Andrea, do you have any final thoughts for the people watching tonight?
Yeah, just continue to go on the streets. Continue to support campaigns that are currently going on. So obviously, you Kill the Bills, Black Lives Matter. Those that support XR as well, like I do. There's so many movements that are going on at the moment, and it's, beautiful to see that people are coming to the streets passionate about wanting to change the country. So I just feel that, we've got to continue doing that and continue to put pressure on this government. And for those that know me, please sign my petition as well, to ensure that non-EU rough sleepers are not deported, because Priti Patel has brought in this ridiculous policy to deport rough sleepers for literally just rough sleeping. So that's what I'm currently fighting at the moment. It's everything that I'm working on is, either to do with racism or to do with racist policies. It's absolutely ridiculous, but we keep on fighting.
And of course, we should plug your show every Wednesday.
Oh yes, and obviously, watch my show, Labour Black Socialists, on every Wednesday.
Fantastic. Kathy, any final thoughts?
Well, I'm going to give you another quote from Frederick Douglass. So if there's no struggle, there's no progress. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will.
Weyman, do you have any final thoughts for the people watching this programme?
I'd say that solidarity and unity are the two engines that drive forward the movement. And the other part is to educate ourselves together about how to do that. And I would say that sometimes the most important thing we should take away from Black Lives Matter is the eruption of people taking to the streets and changing history for themselves. From Peterloo to now, every struggle, I think, whatever it is, has taken that form. And I think what can be taken out, that was the biggest black and white movement. That was the biggest black and white movement since the civil rights movement. And I think we need to join the movements together to go forward. I think we're at a very dangerous moment with the government. So there's too many thoughts there, I know, for people. But what I would say from that is it was the eruption of, and I hate to use this phrase, the people themselves saying that they wanted change. This was not something that was put forward from above. This came from below, and we need more activities. Solidarity and unity are the two engines that have always led to change. And that's what I would say to people. Remember, solidarity and to be like the people at Pollock Ships, I think is going to be our future. And we're going to have to do more of that for the next 12 months in the future. And I'm looking forward to I'm excited to be part of that movement.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you to both of you for your time. Really fascinating discussion there. Hopefully we'll have you back on at some point in the future to talk about these issues again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
So, really brilliant guest this week. Lots for us to think about. I think the range of experience and knowledge as well was just really, it was a real privilege to be able to have a conversation with those people. What are your initial thoughts on that, Jane?
I thought there was some incredibly interesting things mentioned there, including when D3 said that Black people, in her opinion, are still seen as other and as threatening. That really pulled me up short. I thought, that's not right. Surely that isn't, how we still see Black people today. But actually, you just think about it for a few minutes. And in lockdown, I've caught up on decades worth of television I hadn't watched. And I was absolutely astonished how many times in programs like Broadchurch, Vera, I know not everything I watch is highbrow, but the villain or the bad person was the token Black person in these shows. Unbelievable that that's still going on today. We've got to stop these horrific stereotypes that are causing such damage in our community.
Yeah, and I think there was some really important stuff, wasn't there, about who our real enemies are and how that can unite us.
Absolutely. And the point Weyman made, I thought that was interesting about Line of Duty. I'm still on my shows from lockdown. But, that is right. The reason why that was popular now is because people accept that the police, unfortunately, is riddled with bent coppers. Absolutely riddled with them. And I think he's right. 20, 30 years ago, our parents, our grandparents wouldn't have thought that. But now we accept that is a truth and is something that needs to be dealt with. And we were disappointed with the ending of Line of Duty because they didn't weed out all the bent coppers. And we wanted them to, but of course they haven't. And that's why we have to oppose the likes of spy cops, embedding themselves secretly. And we have to oppose the police bill, which we've covered here on previous weeks. Really important we don't extend police powers. It's something very important in keeping ourselves and our Black sisters and brothers safe.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Especially, there was, the statistics that we heard in that programme about deaths in custody and just the disproportionate number of those individuals who are killed in custody being Black men, basically. Absolutely shocking. We cannot give more power to an institution that clearly needs a lot of work so that everyone gets equal justice. Do you have any final thoughts on this week's episode?
Well, I thought in terms of uniting us, the idea that Weyman put forward, that some of us, our parents, were sent down the pits, that's my family history. Others were enclosed and others were enslaved, but we're all united by the fact that there was some people who organised that and the same people who benefited from that exploitation. So as working class people, we've all been exploited for our labour. And as as D3 said in one of her poems that I heard her reciting recently, you don't need to put yourself in other people's shoes. These are your shoes. And that's true. So when Weyman said that solidarity and unity are the best engines for change, then we've got to make sure that we're pushing that message, because together, like on all of the subjects we cover, but including this subject, together we can win. Absolutely. And that, really powerful statement from Weyman about solidarity and union and unity. That's how we get change. Really, really important message. So look, if you're watching this program, I'm sure you're a supporter of Black Lives Matter if you're watching this program, but do support people on the streets. Go to demos when you can, and also look at some of the material that's been put out by Stand Up to Racism. They do some really excellent work. Given the nature of this week's programme, I don't think it'd be appropriate. Neither of us feel it'd be appropriate for us to have the last word, do we, Jane? No. Not when we've got someone who is so fantastic with words who can sum it up for us. Absolutely. So to take us to the end of the programme, we've got D3 with one of her spoken word performances. We'll see you next week. Good night.
Or forever hold your peace. Slowly stitching lips, silencing a suppressed society, muting complaints of fascism, freedoms and futures with fear of fines and persecution, repressed, restrained and restricted, removing democratic human rights in plain sight. We must fight. Left with little alternative, thanks to the Conservatives. Rethink, reskill, reboot, regress, recede, retreat. Bound and gagged by a bill in a marriage of inconvenience. Protect your right to protest now, or forever hold your peace.